Hello, good evening and welcome to News at 10 on TV3 and 3FM 92.7. We're live from our studios in Kanda, Accra, and we're also streaming live on our Facebook page and on the internet at 3news.com. My name is Stephen N.T. Let's start with a summary of the day's major news highlights. Minority in Parliament wants government to amend the Criminal Act before it can proceed with a special prosecutor's bill. According to them, the Constitution has already vested in the Attorney General the powers to prosecute. Meanwhile, the Special Prosecutor's Bill has been taken through its second reading in Parliament. The pathologist who conducted the autopsy on late Major Maxwell Mahama has told an Accra Magistrates Court he could not trace parts of the body of the deceased. During the autopsy, Dr. Lawrence Edusai told the court he's unable to tell who had taken the body parts and for what purpose. And organized labor is upset at the National Pensions Regulatory Authority for failing to honor an invitation to explain how much is in the temporary pensions fund account at the Bank of Ghana. Leadership of the unions have therefore warned the pensions regulator and PRA to be ready to fund another event which will invite them to disclose the amount. Management of the Tema PSC shipyard has described as needless calls by the Maritime Dock Workers Union for the Managing Director, Captain Francis Micah, to be sacked. General Manager of Business Development Department of the company, Alicia Tokonu, said for the first time the yard has recorded 20% growth in revenue within 1 year and a half of her administration. And elsewhere in Kenya, the presidential polls have closed after a presidential election rerun there. The polls were marred by isolated clashes and a boycott by the main opposition. The Electoral Commission in Kenya says voting in those areas will be postponed until Saturday. So those were our major news highlights. Remember, we're streaming live on our Facebook page, and you can also hear us live on 3FM 92.7. Up next is the big one. Welcome back. Now, President Akufo-Addo has on many platforms directed the police to deal decisively with the negative vigilantism in the country. Yet groups associated with the ruling NPP continue to attack people with impunity, even including government appointees. The news team asked the Inspector General of Police, David Asante-Apietu, if the service is overwhelmed by these vigilante groups. Let's hear his response.
It is our duty, our mandate, to ensure law and order. But what somebody intends doing, or crime he has intended to commit, sometimes we are unable to prevent it. It does happen, and it is for us to respond accordingly. Well, someone would say that we should live in a society where all these things should not happen. But it's an ideal one, and I don't know. I don't think it is possible to have a society that is crime-free. They will occur, but our response and how we are able to manage it is what is important.
Is political manipulation one of the challenges the police is facing in dealing with these?
When crimes are committed, we don't give it any color. It's crime. So we deal with it as that.
But when you have groups affiliated to one party or another committing crimes, allegedly committing these crimes, when you have groups that are affiliated to one party or another allegedly committing these crimes, doesn't it then make it somehow political?
This is the last question. As a police officer, we deal with crimes. If you are from a political party, you commit a crime, we're going to deal with you accordingly and not as somebody coming from another political party. Thank you.
Right, so that's the Inspector General of Police, but we'll be going to Skype pretty shortly to speak to Emmanuel Kuting to do some analysis on this, but let me first take you through some statistics of post-2016 violence we have experienced in this country. Now, in December of 2016, there were alleged MPP supporters who took over the Tema motorway toll booth, and then in the next day, the same December 13th, two alleged MPP supporters were arrested for attempting to seize toilet facilities in January the next month. A policeman at the Flagstaff House was assaulted by members of the Invisible Forces. All these took place under the clear administrative watch of the police. And then on the 25th of March, Asante Regional Security Coordinator was attacked by members of the Delta Force. These 13 members of the Delta Force were eventually arrested, put before the court, and were given fines. Some people have described those fines as not punitive enough, but under the law, that was all they could get, really. Now, on 16th of April 2017, the Delta Force also storms the court and set suspects free. So these two attacks were all tied together in that court case we witnessed. It took some months for that case to be wrapped up. And then on the 15th of June 2017, just recently, MPP youth clashed with police in Savalugu over nomination of MC for the area. So you can see a consistent trend of these happenings all over. And then in July of 2017, 27th of July, the Ashanti Region Metro Mass Transit Terminal was stormed by MPP youth, and they were agitated over the appointment of a new Director General, and they made it clear they don't want him. Now, on the 16th of October, very recently, 2017, the school feeding office in Tamale was locked up by MPP youth, and I must stress that these all happened under the clear watch of the police service. Now, 25th October, some irate youth of Karaga clashed, chased out the DC from his official residence. And the latest on this, which we told you about on radio 3FM 92.7 this evening, was that the police have said that they are unable to arrest anyone because of the lack of compelling evidence to prosecute. So that's a snapshot of the challenges that we have been faced with when it comes to vigilante groups. So shortly we will be talking to Emmanuel Kuting, who is on Skype. Let me engage Emmanuel Kuting now, and then we can have a chat about it. Mr. Kuting, good evening.
Good evening, Bright, and thanks for having me. And again, good evening to your cherished viewers.
We're happy that you could join us. Now, this problem of vigilantism is getting out of hand. I might put it lightly, but the IGP consistently has been saying that they will deal with any groups of individuals who call themselves whatever when they fall foul to the law. Do you get the impression that the police service have shown that it is actually dealing with these problems?
Well, thank you. Listening to the IGP, the #1 police officer of our country, it shows clearly his hands are tied because of serious political interference in whatever investigations or actions they might take to addressing the issue. Clearly, political vigilante groups are a major threat to the very survival of our democracy. And if care is not taken, one day we'll be asking ourselves how we got to this place. But I think that with the political will, we can tackle this issue from 3 angles.
But Mr. Kutin, when you say the police, the IGP's hands are tied at his back, is that the impression you get? That there's been massive political interference, or you're making inferences from what is happening and how the police is dealing with them? Right, I think we have major technical challenges with Mr. Kutin's Skype, but we will try to re-establish contact. Mr. Kutin, you're back. Grateful
the statistics you just put out there for all of us to see. At the statistics you just put up for all of us here to look at, just the year 2017, the number of activities of the political vigilante group. And these vigilante groups are tied to a particular party. And unfortunately, that is the ruling party. Look at the Karuga incident that happened a few days ago. This incident was led by the constituency chairman of Karuga. And as we speak, no arrests have been made. And police are telling us that there are no compelling evidence to do so. Your guess can always be good as mine, political interference. And I'm saying that, look, until we tackle these issues from three fronts, we will continue to talk and we cannot walk our talk. One, the political parties themselves must realize that they are creating a monster for themselves. And today, they may be doing things that they may feel it is inuring to their political advantage. It will get to a time, this same group will be attacking the very survivor of the party. And I feel that the political parties have a duty to educate its members to clearly understand the working of government and the working of a political party. Let's look at the Karuga case and take into perspective, Bright. A constituency chairman who should know better will lead a group of his members to attack a government, and the government is his party in government. It shows that the education is not there. And the political parties might be mindful of the kind of people they put out there at the grassroots to lead their leadership structures. Another thing we need to be looking at is the police as a whole engaging all the various political parties. They shouldn't wait for elections to come. Then they'll come out with very alcohol and window dressing solutions, and after elections, the issues are there. I think that political parties must show a zero tolerance for any form of vigilante groups within their ranks. Because if you look at the vigilante groups by itself, they are threatening the very survival of our democracy, like I mentioned. And I think that they must show the way. Because if you want our legal system to deliver justice by meting out deterrent punishment, I'm not sure that is going to work out. Let's look at it in perspective, right? That police will carry out investigations, right? And they are carrying out investigations against a political party who is in government. You can imagine the political pressure that will be on the investigative team. After that, investigations are carried out. Who prepared the charges? The Attorney General. And the Attorney General is appointed by government and is a politician. So what will be the moral duty of the Attorney General preferring the right charges against its own members?
Right,
so
Mr. Kuting.
I think that we cannot blame our judges, because it's the issue of garbage in, garbage out. Whatever you put before the judges, they'll base on those evidence and prefer whatever, or mete out whatever punishment they want to do.
Right, Mr. Emmanuel Kuting, we're grateful. Thank you extremely for joining us. Mr. Emmanuel Kuting is a counter-terrorism expert, and I'm Stephen Anti. This is still News at 10. You can hear us live on 3FM 92.7. We have more news for you. Please don't go away. Welcome back. Now, the Deputy Minister Designate for Food and Agriculture, Kennedy Nyarko Osei, has told the Appointments Committee during his vetting Thursday that the ministry is working at bringing the fall army worms under control.
It was reported in the media that you have stated that the army worms have been defeated.
Looking at the control level, the level it has been controlled, I can confidently say that we have been able to defeat the army, because if you have a farmland of about 112,000 hectares being attacked and 98,000 hectares have been recovered, just 14,000 hectares have been destroyed. Then if you look at the recovery rate, that means we have defeated the army. I admit that army worm has become a challenge for all of us, especially the African country. So we are working on it hard, and I know the ministry has put in place measures to ensure that they're able to control the invasion of this army so that they don't destroy our farmlands.
He also indicated fertilizer should be subsidized so everyone would be able to buy rather than to give out for free. Kennedy Nyarko Osei takes over from William Kwetu, who resigned his post as Deputy Agric Minister owing to some alleged ethnocentric comments he made that received public backlash.
Let's get onto the telephone lines quickly. Edward Kariwa is the General Secretary of the General Agricultural Workers Union, GAO, and he's joining me now. Good evening, sir. Thank you. We're grateful for your time. The Deputy Minister clearly has told us now that the army worms, fall army worms, have not been totally dealt with. Now, the minor season is almost ended, really. Tell me how destructive the worms have been to your members.
Well, let me say good evening to all of you and to the many farmers and then Ghanaian workers listening and viewing your program. The facts are clear that the armyworm has actually indeed caused a devastation to many agricultural lands. The conservative figures were those that came from the ministry. Not all the areas were given report or were reported. The devastation indeed is not totally general to every region. You know, different regions experience different levels of destruction. And again, if you look at the profile of the farmers who have suffered from the fall armyworm, where some are just 2 to 3 acres of farm or up to 5 acres, you can imagine how devastating it will be to the farmer whose 3 acres have been destroyed, and which indeed is the main source of income for the entire family, as against someone who may have 20 acres and only 3 of them are destroyed. The effect will not be the same for the two farmers.
Right, so Mr. Kariwa, I know that moving forward, every farmer would be wanting to prevent any kind of effect from the worms in the next planting season. So what would you say should be done to ensure that in the next planting season we don't have these army worms coming up again?
Well, what I know is that some of our research institutions, like the CSR institutions that are working there, like Savannah Agricultural Research Institute and a Crop Research Institute, and so many other institutes are working hard on that. The other thing we need to appreciate is that we need to also tap the native knowledge methodology of the farmers, how some of them without chemicals manage to control, and then also to be clear about what chemicals indeed are effective in controlling the fall.
I'm a bit interested. I'm interested in
those ones.
I'm interested in what you just said, that how farmers without chemicals were able to control it. Can you give us a hint of how those farmers went about it?
Well, of course, those farmers who did not use chemicals and yet be able to control, they use an organic approach. But you can see that our agricultural policy is not placing emphasis on organic approach to farming. It's rather the chemical approach to farming. And that indeed also exposes the farms to pest infestation and also make it more difficult to control the pests even when they indeed invade the farms. So one sure way is to use the organic approach. And I don't think that given our agricultural policy as it stands now, we are ready for that approach. But of course, that is the best going forward.
Right. Mr. Kariwa, we're grateful for your time. Thank you extremely. Mr. Kariwa is with the General Agric Workers Union, Edward Kariwa. Let's move away from the agricultural sector. Still in Parliament, minority there wants government to amend the Criminal Act before it can proceed with the Special Prosecutors Bill. According to the minority, the Constitution has already vested in the Attorney General the powers to prosecute. Meanwhile, the Special Prosecutors Bill has been taken through the second reading in Parliament.
The minority maintained it is not against the setting up of the Special Prosecutor Office, but rather its procedure. During the second reading of the Special Prosecutor Bill, the minority leader questioned the procedure of the bill.
Is it that a special prosecutor will do and can do that the Attorney General is not vested with authority to do? It's my simple multi-million-dollar question. What is it? Because, Mr. Speaker, they say influence. And, Mr. Speaker, that leads me to appointment. In this bill, the same president who appoints the Attorney General is the same president you say will appoint the special prosecutor. Therefore, the principle of prosecutorial independence is defeated in this bill.
He suggested all financial malfeasance brought before the Public Accounts Committee must be dealt with by the special prosecutor.
We need to make corruption a high-risk activity. Therefore, it doesn't know political colors.
While MP for Adenta maintains the bill, if passed, would help fight corruption, MP for Boko Central insists existing institutions investigating corruption cases should be well resourced to work.
This country has facilitated between quasi-judicial measures, commissions of inquiry, to draconian authoritative measures where people have been shot out of hand without trial for corruption, to the point where we have come back to adversarial means following common law principles. And Mr. Speaker is a very senior lawyer. At the end of the day, it is the quality of the judgment, the conviction, the reasoning of the judge, the analysis of the facts and the law, and the application of the facts to the law to the facts, that will determine independence or otherwise of any prosecution.
Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Ayariga rationalized that we should rather strengthen existing institutions and leave them to perform. Mr. Speaker, in corruption cases, one can never provide sufficient motivation or incentives.
The Attorney General and Minister of Justice indicated the existing institutional framework are confronted with bottlenecks.
Perhaps this is the time to deal with that canker called corruption. And to do that, Mr. Speaker, we must pry that can gingerly and deal with the context.
In the bill, a division would be established dedicated to the recovery of assets which will be seized. Provisions have also been made in the bill to empower the office to request accused persons to disclose their assets, as well as freeze assets of persons alleged to have committed corruption offences. Tainted property are also to be confiscated and vested in the state. The bill has meanwhile been read for the second time.
Right, so that's how we wrap up World News at 10. Thank you extremely for making time. For those who logged into onto the internet to watch our live stream, thank you very much. And those who tuned in to radio 3FM 92.7, we're grateful. There is more news at 3news.com. On behalf of the crew here, good night.